Welcome back to another episode of the Bear Trap on the Boom and Bust channel, a Bears podcast by a Bears fan. I'm your host, Terry, and today we're going to talk, I'm going to try to keep it short. We'll see. Short, relatively. We're going to talk about, what's his name, Josh Lucas. I guess he did the interview with 670 The Score. He's former director of player personnel with the Chicago Bears. I had one user, I don't have it pulled up. I want to say it's Keenan Cart, but asked me to listen to it and talk about it. I gave it a listen. I didn't know who this guy was, because there's a bunch of, especially on Twitter, a bunch of quote unquote experts. So I know what I was getting into, but I always, as I've said before, always appreciate people that talk real football. Like, love the Bears fans and all that. I don't consider this audience fans like of me, but fans of the Bears. So I'm cool with fans and everything, casual football, but I'm just cut from a deeper cloth of football. So coach to coach is always great, but then even like my favorite analysts are former front office people, hands down. They talk the most real. They might not give you everything in terms of like situationally what's going on with like what should a coach do here or blah blah blah, but in terms of like team building and contracts and like player evaluation, they always give you the best stuff. And don't forget, I wouldn't say my I guess technically my first love is drafting, because I've been doing that since I was in high school, back when I played, and coaching came later in life. I've always loved the draft. So, and as I said, now I know people who have turned to, actually I know people who are scouts in the NFL. And then I know people who are doing kind of like the quasi scouting market. But yeah, when it comes to draft, obviously the casual fan only cares about mock drafts. But us people that are really into it, like it's a deep world, and so I always appreciate hearing people that talk my language. So I was glad, because like I said, I didn't know who he was, and it was cool to like hear insight that actually made sense. I think some people just listen to anything that sounds kind of like right, even though they don't know if it's right. But for me, I know what I'm looking for, so it's cool to hear people, even when I don't agree, to just talk about like things that sound like the actual in and out of football and the NFL and all that. So anyway, then we're going to talk a little bit about quarterbacks in general. So real quick, I mean, not real quick, but I'm going to go through kind of the main chapters of the interview, not in order of the interview, but timeline wise of the Bears. And then I'll circle back with this quarterback thing, because it's a interesting discussion. I have it every year as I start the draft. I know people don't pay attention to that content as much, but I have this discussion every year about how I evaluate quarterbacks and everything and all the little ins and outs, and we'll get into it. So, first thing, and I'm going to just summarize, definitely check out 670 Score Josh Lucas. But I'm going to summarize some of the things they said. So, first of all, I think the first discussion is Mitch Trubisky, in terms of selecting him out of the group. Now, here's the hard truth. And I am very much open that I do not get down with Deshaun Watson after what happened. I was never on his side when this whole thing went down. And that's just off the field purely. And I still think it's monstrous that the man is playing in the league. So there's that part. Prior to that, I was never a big Deshaun Watson fan in terms of the way everybody talked about. So Deshaun Watson, I guess I should go in order, but Deshaun Watson, of course, for Bears fans, and I was living in Chicago at the time, so trust me, I heard it everywhere. That's who the Bears wanted. Hands down, they want to take a quarterback. They were sick of, the mediocrity. They wanted him so bad. And still to this day, even knowing what they know now, a lot of people say they will wish we took Deshaun Watson. And so that's cool. I will never not acknowledge that's the truth. fans that want to claim that they were on that from the beginning, that's perfectly fine. That's true. But the fact of the matter is, as I said before, that Trubisky, Deshaun Watson, and Pat Mahomes did not have good grades in the NFL. They were not looked at as good prospects. They weren't good prospects, to be honest. They weren't good prospects in my estimation, and obviously how I evaluate is different. But in the NFL's measures as well, they were not good prospects. This is what I've said. And so when they asked how did they get to Mitch Trubisky? Why not Deshaun? Blah blah blah. So he basically says that Deshaun consistently had a second round grade throughout the league, and he had only one first round grade from the team. And this is a theme throughout the interview. Through the comments, a lot of fans come in to take what he says and be like, yeah, see, the Bears just suck. And clearly taking the wrong things away from the interview. Even the interviewers, the questions they ask, the way they talk, you can just tell these people don't actually know how this stuff goes. Because some of the questions are like, what? And some of the responses are like, what? Like, this is foreign to them. So that's why I always say it's weird to hear fans complain and critique stuff that they have no clue about. So anyway, because, they're like, well, the Bears are idiots. They're the only ones that had a second round grade on him or whatever. No, you have to accept. Hindsight is hard, especially on the internet where people could lie and hide the identity. But the truth of the matter is, in that moment, the league did not consider them good prospects. We know how the draft goes. We just saw how the draft go. Anthony Richardson was kind of, sort of, maybe question mark. The man still went in the top 3. Will Levis, who I don't think had as good an upside, but pretty much the same floor, if not a little better. He goes, but he doesn't go top 10, but he still goes early. Because if a quarterback is even sniffing valuable in the long term, the coach or the teams are going to take him. We've seen it. So you have to really think about it. The Bears had, from what some people might say, might be the only ones willing to take Mitch that high. And I always say it only takes one team. Just because a team decided to take you at 3 doesn't mean you the number 3 overall prospect. It only takes one team. So you got to think about it. The Bears move up and take him at 2. And then Pat Mahomes doesn't go to like 10 or something. And then Watson goes after that. If these were the quarterbacks we're really talking about, there's no way they don't go top 3, even with Myles Garrett. Same thing you think about Kenny Pickett. Now, that's easy to say right now because people think he sucks. But still, in that draft, not only did all these people people literally said that Malik Willis or Matt Corral could go number 2 overall. Matt Corral went to the Panthers in the later rounds. People, because that's the truth. When you think of quarterbacks, that they get pushed all the way to the top. I say that every year. So for Pickett to go number 20, a quarterback, that tells you what the league thought of him. So I say all that to say is you have to realize, I don't care what you look at today, Deshaun Watson, Pat Mahomes, Mitch Trubisky were around the same boat. They just were. And so when they say that Deshaun Watson didn't have high grades on for them, that was the case for the league. Everybody only pointed to 2 things. He beat Alabama, and he's been a starter for a long time. That's it. But when you look at the actual evaluation of the player, Deshaun Watson was not a great prospect. I said it. I still have my report on him. And this guy said it. Deshaun was not accurate. He was not accurate at all. His ball placement, to be honest, it still ain't great. And so he talks about how Deshaun Watson has made a living in the NFL, um, improvising and making off schedule plays. Now, we know now today, and people misquote this all the time, Aaron Rodgers is to credit for that. So that is a much more acceptable thing. That's a much more valuable thing than it was back then. But still, he says you can't make a living in the NFL like that and consistently winning. This is what I focus on. Because, yes, I don't even say yes. To be honest, I don't agree, and I'll get to that in a second. But if you want to say yes, Watson was consistently good at making off script plays, that's fine. That doesn't get you wins. So we saw them go to the playoffs. I believe it was once, and they played the Bills, who are not the Bills they are today, and not the Josh Allen he is today. And or Deshaun looked terrible, absolutely terrible. When you talk about real football, he looked terrible. Same thing with Lamar that we've seen so far in his playoff performances. Terrible. Josh Allen looked terrible. Again, different Josh Allen back then, but he looked terrible. All that extra stuff, like, is nice compliment, but the biggest plays Mahomes makes is in the pocket. The biggest plays any quarterback makes is in the pocket. So when they say they didn't have good grades on that and they didn't know if he could translate his skill set or improve his skill set with the process and the pocket stuff, that's real. And that's very much what the consensus was. Now, they looked at Trubisky and Mahomes. They said those are the two we feel comfortable with, but they like Trubisky better. And the reason for that is because Mahomes, same thing. He was much more of a wild child gunslinger, which people mistakenly today again will say that's what makes him great. That's not what makes him great. That's not like the cute stuff the Chiefs do, whatever. That's fine. But at his core, Pat Mahomes is great, and I've gone through tape and everything because of what he can do in the pocket. Point blank, period. What he can do in the pocket is what makes him great. Because when you compliment, it's the same thing like any position, but like a quarterback. If you can run like Justin Fields, that's great. But when you can't pass, it makes your running less effective because you're one-dimensional. But when you can pass and then throw in the run here and there, it's so much more effective. And that's what makes Pat Mahomes great. He can do it in the pocket, and so you're worried about that. But then once that breaks down, he could do something else different. So anyway, Pat Mahomes had kind of the same similar issue. His arm was a lot liver. Trubisky's in Mahomes' arm was a lot liver than Watson. And so they said that was where the two they were okay with, but they felt that Trubisky could translate and grow. He also said that neither Trubisky nor Justin Fields had the amount of games they wanted played, but they value that a lot. So again, for different reasons, for Mitch, it was very much his resume. Not only the number of games he played, but the level of competition in the ACC. So there was a lot of that discussion back then as well. I don't believe I talked much about Mitch being able, like, not being able to process and everything. I think like most quarterbacks in college, you watch the film and you're like, okay, we don't know yet. We have to see them in situations with the live bullets or whatever and see how they work with an NFL pocket against NFL defenders. In college, a lot of times, as you know, is going to be a lot cleaner. So anyway, that's kind of how they made their decision on Watson. And I'm fine with it. I was not a Trubisky fan. I was not a fan of any of these guys. I would have to look at the draft to remember. I wasn't a Solomon Thomas fan, but there was other people I wanted. Obviously, if the Browns really were talking about Mitch Trubisky, I would have loved, or I don't care who it was, Mitch Trubisky, but I don't care who it was. If they were really deciding on that, I think we should have went guns a-blazing for Myles Garrett, but 49ers, knowing them, probably wouldn't let that happen. So that's kind of where my eyes was. I was like, let's trade back and get something else in the middle rounds because I was not a fan of any of these quarterbacks. So, the Bears fans, like I said, I give them credit. They were always, a lot of them were always on Deshaun. But to sit here and act like the Bears were the only one that weren't for Deshaun, that's silly. And to act like these were bona fide prospects is silly too. None of them were. They were not. And to be honest, if the Chiefs didn't move up and if the Texans didn't move up, there was thoughts that those quarterbacks could fall to the late teens, if not to the 20s. That's the type of caliber that people were looking at. And so there's that with the Deshaun Watson thing. I mean, you mentioned that they knew they weren't going with him. It was really Mahomes and Trubisky, but they were going to have dinner with him. And that's one of the things that also threw me. It was like, why didn't y'all have dinner with him? Even if you knew you weren't going to take him, like for scouting purposes. Okay, he could have went to the Lions. That means nothing. What does going to a dinner going to give you that film doesn't give you? Not to mention, when he goes to a new team, he's with a new staff, a new system. That's not going to tell you anything. But those are the things that fans, first of all, they offered him to have dinner when they went to his pro day. Went to his pro day. And people act like they just ignored. They went to his pro day, offered him dinner. He declined. He had other teams to meet with. But fans don't know these things. They just run with narratives that they make up or sports media makes up. Because I've always heard that the Bears never even looked at Deshaun. That's not true. It's the same thing that happened this year. When I said the Bears are going to look at other quarterbacks. No, they're not. Justin Fields just did. They're going to look. Everybody does. Now, for that, I give you like a 1% truth. Like, as far as scouting advantage, like looking at all the players coming in, that's like 1%. Like, if you're playing a guy, whatever, in week 4, are you going to go back and look at his college tapes from 3 years ago? No, you're going to look at what he's doing in the NFL. So, yes, you do your due diligence, but it ain't no big thing to have dinner with somebody, whether they did offer or not. But those are the things that fans harp on to drive their narrative. So, anyway, that was that. They talked about trading up. It was pretty simple. It's simple draft stuff. They like the amount of connections that people think the quote-unquote insiders have is nothing compared to what the actual people have. Between agents, players, coaching friends, all that, family members, all those things, they're connected. So the Bears said that they heard from people that weren't the 49ers. It's not like people act like John Lynch called like this was draft day. Hey, I got this pick and somebody's about to come get it. You better trade up. Like, and they keep saying he got fleeced. Like we gave up 2 first-round picks to move up one spot. Like it was a mid-round pick that honestly don't matter that much. But people want to make it a big deal again, drive their own narrative. The facts is they heard that there was a team coming up to get Mitch and they wanted to solidify it. I'm okay with the move. I said it that night. Again, not the player I want, not that something I would have did. But if it to them is the player they really want, then yeah, that's not a big price to move up to make sure you get them. So there's that part. I never thought that was a big conversation, but some Bears fans still like to harp on it. So that was pretty simple. And then they said that their thoughts was that if Cleveland took Trubisky, that they were okay with getting Mahomes, which kind of solidifies what I just said in my thought process. 49ers were not going to let Myles Garrett go for nobody. So they were okay with just getting Pat Mahomes. And I will say that they asked the question, do you think Mahomes is still Mahomes even on the Bears? And he said, yes, there's a few players that can be productive in all 32 teams you drop them in. I completely disagree, especially Pat Mahomes. There are players, absolutely, but quarterbacks, there's not many. especially not Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes, for as great as people know he is, because I think he is probably one of the best quarterbacks ever, it doesn't happen in another situation, and that's one of the things we can never figure out. But it does not happen the way it happened right now. Maybe he gets there, or maybe he is good but doesn't have the success, or maybe he has success but never has to unleash like the type of play that he has done now. But it does not happen here. It does not happen in other places. Besides being able to sit, besides having really good coaches around him, not just Reed, you had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey. Like, come on. So I don't agree with that, but they were willing to roll with Mahomes. But again, none of them were high value prospects. So and that's always been the case if you listen to anybody that does draft stuff around that time. All right. So that's trading up, that's the dinner, that's all that. So let's go to Justin Fields real quick. So they started off talking about what were the concerns with Justin Fields coming in. And the concerns they talked about was him being methodical, robotic, some might say, and that he would not have that luxury in the NFL like he does in Ohio State to just sit there and be 1, 2, 3, or be robotic about it. He's going to have to be able to read it faster, make snap decisions, and deal with dirty pockets. And they felt that it's going to take him some time, but they feel that he has what he said, a built-in get out of jail free card every play with his legs, and that would help buy him time because he could steal first downs, he could steal explosive plays to make up for that production while he learned to play the quarterback position. And a couple things he mentioned the 10,000 hours in the NFL. That was a big metric. Now, I think most people understand that today's NFL is very heavy on analytics, no more so than in the draft. They have all types of metrics of what they think works. Now, I'm not going to go deep into it. It's my same philosophy. Numbers don't tell the whole story. Numbers tell part of stories. You can make numbers lie. So just because there's correlation doesn't mean there's causation. Say, so 40s, they'd be like, oh, every top player has had a 40 in this time or whatever, or average, whatever. So does that mean if you have a 40 in that time, you're going to be an all or a Pro Bowler or All Pro? No, it doesn't. Just because there's a correlation there doesn't mean that's the cause of it. So a lot of these numbers or whatever, but they have all types of metrics. So they said 10,000 hours in the NFL. In the NFL is what they wanted. They wanted him to get to that point. They felt that's what the science says is the point where he can master. And he talked about time on task, which I mentioned before, teaching term that's become popular in the NFL. Time on task. They understand now, which is why I think it's always funny to hear people say, yeah, just trade a player or quarterback and drop him in, or put a coach in and drop him in and bring in a new system. Drop quarterback in, give him a new system, blah, blah. It's not great. For as much crap as Baker took, being dropped in Carolina and then being dropped in LA, like that's not easy to do with a whole new system, like at all. Like people do not. I mean, watch the quarterback documentary on Netflix just to get an idea of how much goes into a playbook. So that stuff's not easy. So time on task is a big thing, which is why college reps are a big thing. These guys that have done it, the small things, they know how to line up in depth. They know how to take the drops. They know how to throw from the hitch. They know how to ball handle, mesh points, all the small things. They've been under center, blah, 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 blah. So they were thinking that they wanted him to sit and he could work up to that. But that's kind of what they thought. Obviously Trevor was number one. But they say they had Justin Fields next and then Mac Jones. That Trey Lance and Zach Wilson had no support from the personnel side or the coach side of the team. And so they weren't even considering them, but they knew that Zach Wilson to the Jets was a done deal in March. Talking again about the connections, they know some things. So they knew Zach Wilson was going, and they pretty much knew Trey Lance would probably be after that. So they were happy with where they were. It was just like, do we want to trade up to go get him? And so, but they talked about the concerns again, which is frankly what we see right now and what we hear. The Ohio State quarterbacks, number one, you're not going against quality competition every week. You will play the big names, but a lot of times you're playing against guys that's not going to be in the pros, and just how they had a clean pocket, and it's not realistic to the NFL, which is what I've said and what, a lot of people talked about with Ohio State, but the college guys in general. And so those were some of the issues in terms of being able to be accurate from the pocket. And as he talked about as well, like with Deshaun, you have to be able to do it from the pocket. That's what, and I've said that all the time. Every time I hear this, you can't force a quarterback to be a pocket passer. What? An NFL quarterback is a pocket passer. There is no difference. I'm so like, I've seen Lamar win the MVP with an unconventional style. 100% give him credit for that. What have they done to that style since then? And what has that style done in the playoffs? That's my thing. Other than that, I've not seen this Tim Tebow offense that everybody seems to think can win. And I mean, so I don't understand why people don't get you have to be a pocket passer. You just do. And if you don't agree with it, you need to understand it's objective science. There's a limited amount of space. There's a limited amount of time. Scientifically, from the pocket, rhythm throw is going to be the most effective for something explosive. As far as break and contain, freelancing a play, that is not going to be consistently open. So pocket passing is a necessity. I heard Michael Irvin say that. I mentioned in the community. He talked about it when the Justin Fields whole comments. And they took the side of Justin Fields. But even at the end, he said most smart thing I could ever heard, which, Michael Irvin likes to be a showman. I didn't think he would say this, but he just said that, hey, Justin Fields, you also wrong. You got the wrong mindset. You should want to be able to play in the pocket. All the running around and stuff is a good compliment, basically what I said. But to win in the NFL, you have to play from the pocket. So that was kind of their reasoning there. They talked about, like I said, how they didn't want Mitch or Justin to play because Justin was a 2-year starter. Mitch was a 1-year starter. They felt like they needed more time on task. They needed more time to learn the NFL and the playbook. And he mentioned that like it's a huge advantage for these guys to get to sit for a few years. Even, he said, especially if it's a guy that, gets it done at a high level. But in general, having them sit for a few years is an invaluable tool. And we all know that. I've talked about many. I watched it in real time. NFL owners go to crybaby fans and turn everything to instant gratification. And no longer will we be patient with anything. It all has to happen now. I got a shiny new toy. Put them on the field now. And fans act like that too. And it's just, I've said for a while it's ruined quarterbacks. And it's ruining them at a higher rate. So people want to sit here and blame Getsy and say he can't coach. Or blame Eberflus somehow, say he can't coach. I write y'all off. I'm going to be honest. I do. There's so much other important stuff that goes in. It's a whole mentality that's happening right now. And then people will say, well, how come this person stepped in and did this? Like right now, people are already arguing about the first pick. Stroud was clearly the best pick. Then you got people, Anthony Richardson was clearly the best. He should have been number one. The Panthers made a franchise crippling mistake. It is 4 games into the season. Stroud A could have a terrible rest of the season. or he could have a great year and look terrible next year. Like, as I always tell you, prospects, especially quarterbacks, 3 years, 3 full seasons before you could really. So the old system was 16. So 32, 48 games, rounded up to 50, 50 games. And then you know what you got. Like this, yeah. So the instant gratification thing is destroying quarterbacks more than any offensive coordinator is. I'm gonna tell you that. All right. So I already talked about how they compared the two. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That was pretty much it. And so I'm not gonna spend too much time because I already went long. But like I said, I talked about quarterbacks. People always like, why is it so hard to evaluate quarterback? Like y'all can't do it. So, and I'm going to give you the boring answer that I've already given you. It's hard to evaluate quarterbacks because you cannot compare situations. You just can't. There's no person with the cognitive ability or any technological tool that we have right now that can accurately tell you what this player looks like in this situation versus this one. You know how many factors go into that? Which is why it literally hurts my brain to hear people talk about Daniel Jones or Justin Fields or Kenny Pickett or any of these people. There's so many factors. And look, there is the possibility that the player is not a great quarterback compared to everybody else. But there would take so much evidence to make me believe that. It just would. It's the same way that Belichick could be called the best coach in history to some, and then without Tom Brady, they say that he doesn't know how to coach. It's silly. I mean, it's hand to hand. It's a team sport. Sports media has forced the most surface level conversations and has turned everything into a this or that, a either or, black or white. And that's not good for anything, but it's surely not good for football, the most team sport there is. And so, besides rugby, maybe. But anyway, so the best analogy that I have that I absolutely love is movies. Movies and football line up so well. It's so many it's so many great analogies that work. But at the end of the day, you watch a great movie, we know that the cinematographer is not going to get as much hype. We know that the costume designer is not going to get as much hype. The people that make the sound mix, but they're part of the movie is very important. You see the actor in front, and the actor might have a star name to even bring you to the movie, so that it gets all this value. But at the end of the day, it took so much to make that movie, and had one or two things not been up to par, the movie suffers as a whole. And so while everybody wants to make it a quarterback movie star discussion or director head coach discussion or sometimes a producer GM discussion, the fact is there's so much that goes into it. And so when you're talking about taking a quarterback from this situation in college especially to this situation in the NFL, there's so many factors that go into what's going to impact their play, from the roster, from the relationships they build, the system they're putting them in, the city they're in, the owner, all those things go into it. And then what I think is most important, and some, you got more heavy scouts that will lean towards the most important thing is this number or this, time or whatever. But a lot of the people in that community will tell you the most important things for them are interviews. I mean, the film is going to be number one. Don't get that wrong. But for me, the most important thing is the interview, because I could watch a Johnny Manziel. I could watch a Jamarcus Russell. I could watch, name any player that doesn't work out. I could watch and see on film what they do on the field, but until I know who they are off the field, how they are coached, then that's the only way I'm going to know that I'm getting a player that won't get much better if we don't push them or if something doesn't change, or I'm getting a player that's going to do something reckless off the field and not be available for me, or a player that doesn't love the game and just wants the money or the fame. Like, you have to know the person to know those things. And so those to me become some of the most important pieces when you're talking about drafting a quarterback or any player, but a quarterback as well. And the other thing that he said, because I thought this was one of the most cornball casual fan comments. The interviewer just like, I met Mitch Trubisky twice, never met Mahomes, but I watched interviews. I don't see how you sit in a room with these two guys and don't come away knowing Mahomes is better. He just seems smarter. And I think that's just poorly worded, very disrespectful, but highly incorrect. And so when Josh pushes back, the guy says, isn't there value in being able to show a player plays and get them to get back on the board and spit it back out to you? And he was like, Mitch was incredible with that, but that's not the same as going into the live bullets. And that's another misconception fans have. First of all, you had Gruden's QB school. Most of those quarterbacks were excellent. Most of the quarterbacks you hear about in the combines are excellent. Like that is not the biggest thing. The fans they harp on the most, not the most, but some of the things that are just the least consequential, because that's what they hear on TV. That's the narrative. That's the surface level. Oh yeah, I told him this play. He went back up there and drew it up, and he knew the coverages. You really think these quarterbacks don't know coverages? Maybe I wasn't clear. Even in my first situation coaching offense and quarterbacks, I had one quarterback, like he never had to think about this stuff. But I had another quarterback, first of all, that played defensive back. He knows the coverages. He knows what it's supposed to look like. That's not the same as seeing it on the field just because you can see it on the board. And it's not the same seeing it when there's pressure in your face and people are moving. So that's a different type of thing that is hard to measure, and even if you could, I don't think you would truly know until you see it on the field. So yes, a lot of it is projection, obviously, but a lot of it is hoping. Like, we did it enough to believe that we can get you to this point, and for a lot of different reasons, it doesn't work out. So when I look at a quarterback. And this is different now. This changed probably 5 years ago. But the first thing I look at is the arm. Like, to give you a good example, Shedeur Sanders. I haven't watched him yet or anything like that, but right now probably don't have a popular opinion of him, because the first time I watched him, which was with Colorado, I see him with Jackson State. First time I watched him, I was like, oh yeah, he doesn't have a 5-arm. And you don't have to have a 5-arm. There's good quarterbacks that don't have 5. Deshaun didn't have a 5. Tua obviously doesn't have a 5. Like, you don't have to have a level 5 for me to be great. But like I said, I put more value on that because I have learned that in the NFL, the cerebralness is harder to find with the way they develop or don't develop quarterbacks. And even if you are that cerebral, it only takes you a certain way. Now, like I said, it's hard to find cerebral. So if you got a strong arm, it's not a guarantee you'll get to the point where you could be cerebral, but at least you have the arm to bail you out of some plays. And teams are always going to take a chance on that, because at the end of the day, and maybe it was easy to understand, but if you and I or most of us throw a football, it ain't the same as one of these guys throwing football. Some guys genetically, you watch anybody. And the receivers, they're jacked, they're huge, they're physically fit. D-backs physically fit, linebackers, great athlete, running backs. You watch them throw, it ain't nothing like a quarterback throwing. So it is definitely a physical tool and gift that you have or you don't. Your arm typically doesn't get stronger. So much like speed, your speed can increase a certain amount, but you got what you got. And so, same thing with arm talent. That's the first thing I look. Shador Sanders, I'm like, oh yeah, he doesn't have a 5+ arm. I don't know what he has yet. Haven't watched it, but he doesn't have a 5. So that's the first thing I see. Okay, what are we working with there? Now, typically, a lot of players that do have a 5 arm, they got what I call big arm syndrome. And sometimes you get a guy like Levis who has big arm syndrome and doesn't have a 5 arm, which makes it even worse. And big arm syndrome, the Bears will know that's Jay Cutler, big arm syndrome king. Probably not the king, but that's a good example. Really believe you could fit the ball wherever you want to put it, and you will take chances that you don't need to take, and you will be more of a gunslinger because you think you can make that pass. That is the big arm syndrome, and that's hard to get over. That's muscle memory. But you got to clean that up. Josh Allen showed that it still pops up sometimes, but you clean that up. So that's the first thing I look at. And then from there, the second thing is how are you in the pocket? Do you even have to do anything in the pocket? Like we said, Alabama, a lot of teams like that completely don't have to do nothing. Just, whatever. They just stand there, boom, they sit there all day, they don't got to move. But if you do have to move, how do you move? How well do you have the feel? Another thing that is hard to quantify, your pocket presence. Like, that's one thing I did say I love about Anthony Richardson. And I haven't watched him in the NFL closely, so I can't say. But I'm sure that's helping him. And then Pat Mahomes is one of the best. Obviously, Brady was great in the pocket. Russ was probably best in the pocket I've ever seen. And so the pocket is huge. It doesn't matter if you know the play, you see the play or whatever. If you're going to stand there and be a statue, or even worse, you're going to pull out of the pocket prematurely all the time, then you're not going to be as productive as you could be. So those are the first two things I got to see. Because most players aren't having to read coverage like they have to in the NFL. You're just not. So I'm not even expecting to see a ton of that on film. But what I want to know is the physical part, how you throw, obviously what type of athlete you are. Then I want to understand what type of pocket presence you have. Then we'll go to the processing and all that. A lot of quarterbacks are going to have one read offenses. They're going to go for one person, stare it down, throw it to a great athlete, or they're going to take off and run, RPO, whatever. But if you get into pure pass situations, I want to see, pretty much all the other parts. How are you processing? How are you getting from progressions? Can you get from progressions? And then after that, I would also say this is kind of throwing, but also intelligence is your anticipation. Joe Burrow stands out. Tua stands out too. Just great anticipation. I mean, neither one of them have a 5 arm, but great anticipation. You rarely see that in college quarterbacks, to be honest. So there's all the mental part. And then you want to look at the actual accuracy, of course. Deep ball accuracy is number one for me because I feel like, obviously, you get into the NFL, you see some zones and stuff. Things will be open, especially if you got a good team. That's fine. You could get the ball to an open man, but how do you throw the ball deep? Because even if I've seen plenty, you've seen people in the NFL. The guy could be wide open on the deep route. Don't mean you can get the ball to him accurately. And then not only do you miss, how do you miss? Because I personally feel like a guy that overthrows can be closer to being fixed than the guy that underthrows every deep ball. Those are two different problems to have. So there's that. But then you occasionally get guys that got excellent touch and contested deep throws. But that's the number ones I look at. Then from there, I'll look at the medium accuracy. I don't really care about the short accuracy or whatever, unless you're just terrible at it. So those are the things you look at. But all that's great stuff, and it takes you a long way. But I know that you got to stop after that because from this side, you're not going to get a great evaluation of a quarterback because of all the things that I talked about earlier. You have to be in the room with them. And you have to understand what type of player you're getting. And then on top of that, obviously, what you put them around is huge. I mean, Josh Lucas talked about how the first year really, he said, crippled the development of Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky. And that's what I've been talking about for a long time. I mean, same stuff I've been saying, that what you get exposed to that first year creates habits, and habits are hard to break. It doesn't matter what you were in college. That doesn't matter, because your mind is going to psychologically tell you this is different and we got to approach it different. So once you get to the league, whatever works for you is what your mind's going to lock into. And if it's bad habits, then that's what you're going to do. And that's what Trubisky and Fields got exposed to, because they didn't have the protection or the supporting cast to really help them. Because these are guys that obviously were not going to raise the team, and no rookie really does. But these aren't type of quarterbacks going to raise the team. These are the type of guys that are going to shine within a good system. And they just didn't have that. And then the other thing, last thing, which I found funny that Josh Lucas said, is that the most important thing for quarterback or any other position above anything else is confidence. He said that is the difference every time. And that's what I've been telling you. So anyway, that's it for me. I think I hit all the points. If not, go to the comment section, let me know. Share around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and remember, stay up and bear down.